What's up, guys? Hopefully, you're all having a good day. I thought I would come on to do an interesting little video this morning talking about the inghams and talking a little bit about, kind of been talking about the, Christian allegations and all that stuff and all that good stuff. So let's get straight into it. Obviously, we all know that Christian the allegations made against Christian are true. A lot of people believe that. I've always believed that. I've never believed that he didn't do anything. I don't think there's ever really been a time where I've looked at Chris and genuinely thought that he was innocent. The thing that stands out to me about these allegations is he's always claimed that the allegations that were made against him weren't true. But he's never actually taken any sort of legal action against the girls who actually made those allegations. It's like surely if someone had made pretty serious allegations against you, and you knew that those allegations weren't true, surely you would want to take legal action against that person. But the fact that Chris has never actually taken legal action against those girls who made the allegations has always it's one of those things that has always stood out to me, and I've always looked at that and thought, well, why has he never done that? He's always claimed the allegations weren't true. So why has he never taken, any kind of any sort of legal action against the girls who actually made the allegations against him? Surely he would have done that. Surely, if he was as innocent as as he claims he is, surely he would have taken legal action against the girls that made the allegations against him. It just doesn't add up. It's just one of those things that has stood out to me for a very long time, is the fact that he's never actually taken any sort of legal action against the girls who actually made those allegations against him. And you think he would have done if the allegations weren't true. You think he would have taken legal action against them, without a doubt. It goes without saying. And that's something that a lot of people need to think about is, if the allegations are not true, why has he never taken legal action against the girls who actually made those allegations? Surely that's what he would have done. If these allegations were not in any way true, surely to God he would, surely to God he would have gone, he would have reported, he would have reported these allegations. He would have confirmed that these allegations weren't true. But there you go. It's funny. I was thinking about the inghams the other day, and I was thinking about that motorbike that Jay's got for his birthday. Like, we've not seen, since he got that motorbike, we've not seen. I don't think we've seen a single picture or video or anything of him actually riding that motorbike. That's the thing that makes me laugh about it. They got him, they got him that motorbike for his birthday. We've not seen a single picture or video of him actually riding the damn thing. And you'd think they'd have shown some pictures of that, of him riding it by now. He's had it for, it's been since about 6-7 weeks, maybe slightly longer, since he actually got that motorbike. And in that time, we've not seen a single picture or video on any of their socials of him actually riding that motorbike. We've not seen any clips of him on any of their TikTok accounts of him riding it. We've not seen any pictures on any of their Instagram accounts of Jay's riding it. We've not, it's like, why did they get it? I feel we could all see that Jay's didn't particularly like it and wasn't particularly keen on it. It was like, I still think it was one of the silliest things they've ever done. And it was just it was obviously another thing that they did just to try and get a few extra views. Because that's the thing, but like the intention behind a lot of the things they do is trying to get extra views, and they thought that them going all out and splashing at hash like that, they think that that's always gonna get them a few extra views. It's like that Christmas vlog. The whole reason that they go so over the top at Christmas, and they buy these mountains. Sarah goes out and she buys all, like these mountains upon mountains of Christmas presents for the kids. They think it will get them a few extra views, and to be fair, I guess it does. But you know, it's like it's just ridiculous. That's what it's all about for them. It's all about like they're doing whatever they can to get a few extra views. It's like, they're so desperate to keep their channel going, keep their channel alive. But, I think they need to face the facts, and I think they need to admit that their channel, that their channel is failing, and that, you know, I think it is time for them to call it a day. I think the views these days, the views they're getting on their vlogs now is shit. I mean, yesterday's vlog is sitting at what 11, 12,000 views. Well, that's even worse than one of the vlogs the other day. You know, the fact that a vlog is sitting at sitting that low with regards to views. You would never expect to see that, a vlog getting 11,000 views, especially on a channel that prides itself on having over 1.3 million subscribers. As I said the other day, you'd be expecting their channel to be getting, you know, well over 100,000 views. But as I said the other day, we all know why people stop watching the Ingham vlogs. It's not just because the Ingham vlogs got boring. People stopped watching them ages ago because of what Chris did. You know, because people were so disgusted by what he did. That's why people stopped watching. You know, I think at the end of the day, no matter what, I know obviously the other day I was saying about that no hell no video that he did. You know, when you go back and watch that, you can see that there's nothing. It's not like he's being genuinely honest in that video. The whole time, it just feels like he's reading from a script, like he's reading words that have been written down on a piece of paper. He couldn't even look directly at the camera during that video. His eyes were all over the place. That's a telltale sign that you know that they are lying. It's like half the time they can't even look directly at the camera. That's how you know that most of the time they're talking absolute bullshit. I have seen that there seems to be some speculation at the moment that Sarah and might be pregnant again. I hope she isn't, because she can't cope with the 6 that she already has now. You know, and if she has another baby, it would obviously be another attempt for them to try and get a few extra views. They seem to think that having another kid will always get them a few extra views, and it don't work. It's not gonna, they tried to, it's like no matter how many times and how many more hits they have, they're not gonna get any extra views. They've done that so many times now. The whole new baby thing to try and get having another baby to try and get a few extra views. That was why I think that was a big part of the reasons why they had Jace Miller on the road. Was to try and get those few extra views up. Which I mean, it did get their views up for a little while, but it didn't. It doesn't last long. You know, I mean, it's like Christmas time. They always get a big jump in their view counts over the Christmas period, but then after Christmas, their views go right down. You know, and it's just, I think they need to just accept the fact that people don't care about it. Their channel is done at the end of the day. YouTube for them just isn't for them anymore. Simple as that. As I said with this whole, with the whole Christian allegations, I still think, I just think it's so bizarre the fact that, he's always claimed that the allegations made against him weren't true, but he's never actually taken any sort of legal action against the girls that made the allegations against him, and you think he would have done. No, if the allegations are not true, as he's always claimed they're not true, why has he never actually taken legal action against the girls that made those allegations, especially if they're not true? That's one of those things one of the biggest things about this that just doesn't add up. That just doesn't add up. The fact that he's never actually, the fact that he's always claimed the allegations weren't true, but he's never actually taken any sort of legal action against the girls that made those allegations. That's one of those things that doesn't make sense to me. If you think, surely if the allegations weren't true, surely he would have taken legal action against the girls that made those allegations. But the fact that he's never done that, is actually quite shocking, to be honest. It's actually quite weird, quite strange, because you're thinking, well, I think anyone would do that. If someone made a serious allegation against them, an allegation they knew wasn't true, surely that an allegation that it wasn't true, they would take legal action against the person that made those allegations against them. But he's never done that. He's never taken any sort of legal action against the girls that made those allegations against him. That, to me, the fact that he's never done that, to me, kind of proves the point. It kind of proves that he's not as innocent as he's made out to be. As he's always made himself out. As if he was completely innocent, he would have taken legal action against those girls and there's no doubt about that. But it's been 8 years? And in those 8 years since the allegations come out, he's never taken legal action against them. Why? Why has he never taken legal action against them? That is my question to Chris, why has he never taken any sort of legal action against the girls that made the allegations against him? That's what people need to be questioning. That's what people need to be looking at here. It's actually it's quite bizarre, to be honest. That's all I'm gonna say. I understand how anyone can support Christian after what he knowing after what he did. Like the fact that even Sarah, the fact that she stood by him after what he did, she should never have done that. She should never have stood by him and supported him after what he did. She should have thrown him out the fucking house. Because I think that's what most normal people and most normal mothers would have done. If their husband or whatever was accused of something like that, they'd have thrown him out the house. But the fact that she stood by him and had 3 more hits by him after what he did, that is just disgusting. In every single sense of the word. And I feel sorry for the kids because the kids are always going to be reminded of what Chris did. That kids are always going to be reminded of who their father is, or of what their father is. They're always going to have to hear that. They're always going to have to, they're always going to be reminded of that. Chris Ingham himself is always going to be reminded of that. Instead of holding his hands up and admitting to what he did, he's instead decided to endure years of constantly being reminded about what he did, constantly being reminded about the allegations that were made against him. As I've said before, if he wants people to stop talking about it, he needs to hold his hands up and admit the truth and admit to what he did. That's the only way he's going to make any of this go away, is by actually admitting what he did and saying, yes, I did actually do that. But until he admits what he did, no one's going to stop talking. It's that simple. So I hope you enjoyed this video anyway. Thought I'd come on and give my thoughts on that. So I'll see you for another video. I'll see you all for another video soon. Bye bye.